Good morning, America. Breaking overnight, disaster at sea. A Navy destroyer collides with an oil tanker. 10 sailors missing, 5 injured, airlifted to safety. The desperate search for survivors and the urgent investigation underway after the second major Navy accident in just 2 months.
Breaking news, a deadly attack in France. A van ramming into 2 separate bus stops, killing at least 1 person just days after those attacks in Spain.
President Trump, back from vacation, set to deliver a crucial primetime address tonight, revealing his military strategy for Afghanistan. Will more troops be added to America's longest war? As the president faces new troubles at home, another staff shakeup. The fallout as Steve Bannon leaves the White House.
We're glowing in the dark.
And it's finally here, the great American eclipse. The countdown is on. Hundreds of millions watching history happen live, flooding into towns along the path of totality as day turns to night. Watching from land, air, sea, and even underwater. How you can join this nationwide celebration, 99 years in the making, with all eyes on the sky. We are live across the country for a special edition of Good Morning America.
From ABC News, live in Times Square, this is Good Morning America.
And Good Morning America. We hope you had a good weekend. We have a lot of breaking news overnight, and of course, millions all across America getting ready for that first total solar eclipse in almost a century. That is just hours away.
That's right, and people have been traveling thousands of miles to see it coast to coast. Over 300 million people are expected to stop and watch as the eclipse takes an hour and a half to move across the country. 14 states are in that path of totality where the sun will be completely covered. But you know what? The entire country is going to get to see at least a partial eclipse.
Yeah, we get about a 3/4 here in New York. But take a look at Oregon right now. Hundreds of people gathering there. They have been camping out, going all across the country to get that first glimpse of the solar eclipse.
This is a real sport out there, and our team is spread out across the country as well, from the Pacific Northwest to the Deep South. World News Tonight anchor David Muir in Charleston all day for our special coverage. We're going to have a lot more on that coming up.
First, that breaking news overnight. The search is on for 10 American sailors missing after a U.S. Navy destroyer collided with a massive oil tanker near Singapore. This is the second naval accident in the last 2 months. Our chief global affairs anchor Martha Radis starts us off. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, George. The ship has made it to port, but this is an astonishing mishap for the Navy. As we speak, that massive search for 10 sailors lost at sea, 7 killed just 2 months ago in a similar accident. And these are not combat operations. These are accidents involving the most sophisticated ships in the U.S. Navy that could likely have been avoided.
The hole in the side of the ship's hull is massive, a tangle of steel exposed. Water pouring from the crippled destroyer after colliding with a 600-foot oil tanker in the South China Sea in the waters east of Singapore. 4 sailors were airlifted to a Singapore hospital, but it is those 10 who are missing who are of greatest concern. The USS McCain, named for the father and grandfather of Senator John McCain, has a crew of just over 300. The collision occurred in a busy shipping lane at 5:24 a.m. Singapore time, the 2 ships ramming into each other in the darkness. This is the second collision involving a ship from the Navy's 7th Fleet in the Pacific in just 2 months. 7 sailors died in June on the USS Fitzgerald after colliding with a container ship from the Philippines. It was left flooded, the sailors on board fighting for their lives.
It was a significant impact to the side of the ship. They had to fight the ship to keep it above the surface.
The commanding officer of the Fitzgerald was in his quarters when the ship was struck and barely escaped alive, but he was relieved of duty along with several others after an investigation that clearly found fault in the crew's actions.
The investigation into what happened on the McCain will begin immediately. Senator McCain tweeting, "Cindy and I are keeping America's sailors aboard the USS John McCain in our prayers. We appreciate the work of search and rescue crews." President Trump tweeting as well, saying thoughts and prayers are with our U.S. Navy sailors. Amy?
All right, Martha Raditz, thank you so much. And let's bring in our military analyst, retired Colonel Steve Ganyard. And Steve, the big question is, what is going on? 2 accidents in 2 months.
Hard to understand, Amy, especially when you have one of the world's most sophisticated warships involved in just a basic collision, a failure of seamanship. But I think one of the things that we look at here is that it was nighttime. It was one of the busiest parts of shipping lanes in the world. 1/3 of all maritime shipping goes through here. So there were probably extenuating circumstances, but no doubt, as we saw in the Fitzgerald, there was probably human error involved as well.
Is there some sort of systemic problem here going on as well?
I think the Navy's going to want to look deep at this. This is the 4th mishap in the Pacific Fleet in only 6 months. And all of these mishaps have just been basic seamanship, not hard things to do. But one of the things we need to look at here, Amy, is that this leaves a real gap in the Pacific Fleet's capabilities at a time when tensions with North Korea are high.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the immediate impact is the tragic loss of life and certainly the financial impact, but there is a larger military impact as well.
There is, and it's something the Navy's going to need to address quickly because Kim Jong-un has not backed down.
All right, Colonel Ganyard, we appreciate it. Thanks so much.
So hard to understand how this could happen so often. We're going to move on now to that breaking news in France. A driver has rammed his van into 2 separate bus stops, killing at least 1 person in the port city of Marseille. The suspect is now in custody, and our chief foreign correspondent, Terry Moran, tracking the latest from London. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, George. A frightening incident for sure, but right now this doesn't look like terrorism. It's just after 8 o'clock this morning in Marseille when a man drove his car into a packed bus stop in the Old City. The driver sped off just as the ambulances were arriving at the scene, and then about 9 a.m., he drove into another bus stop in another neighborhood of the city. Police have detained the man. They say that he is known to authorities from previous petty criminal activity. And while this incident has some of the hallmarks, those ramming attacks that have plaguing European cities, most recently in Barcelona, right now the prosecutor in Marseille is saying, quote, "No elements allow us to qualify this as an act of terrorism. We are treating this as a psychiatric case."
And
George?
Terry, on that terror incident in Barcelona, the manhunt's still on for that driver.
That's right, and that manhunt has been extended right across Europe. Police are searching for 22-year-old Moroccan national Yunus Abu Yaqub. He's been identified and on the run since that attack on Thursday claimed the lives of 13 people, injuring more than 100. That whole cell has now been accounted for, either killed, captured, or Yunus Abu Yaqub is now on the run. George?
Okay, Terry Moran, thanks very much. We're going to get the latest now from President Trump, back from his vacation in the White House this morning and facing new polls that show his approval has dropped in the 3 key states that made him president, in the 30s in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, just days after his controversial response to those events in Charlottesville. And over the weekend, there were more protests in the wake of that Charlottesville violence. They stretched from California to Boston, were mostly peaceful. All this as President Trump prepares to address the nation tonight. His first primetime speech from the White House, the president will unveil his new military strategy in Afghanistan. So let's bring in our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega. Cecilia, the president has struggled with this for months. He is expected to authorize the addition of more U.S. troops on the ground, which he has been very reluctant to do.
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about America's longest running war here, George. This decision comes after Friday's meeting at Camp David, where the president and his national security team met. I'm told that's where basically the president solidified his decision. But as you said, he is likely to follow the advice of his generals like James Mattis, who are recommending the addition of about 4,000 troops to Afghanistan. There are about 8,400 troops that are there right now. Just as you said, though, if that is the case, this would represent a real contradiction from some of his past comments. You know, before he was elected, he said that we should have a speedy withdrawal. Why keep wasting our money there? As president, he's had a more muted response to Afghanistan. But, George, he's faced a lot of criticism, especially from those like John McCain, who say that he's just taken too long to make this decision.
And Cecilia, one of the voices who is strongest against adding more troops to Afghanistan, of course, the president's former strategist, Steve Bannon, who's now left the White House, gone back to Breitbart, and looks to be preparing for a rhetorical war on many fronts.
Yeah, and he was not in that meeting on Friday back at Camp David, George. A war is right. He's back at Breitbart News right there, taking up his old title as executive chairman of that conservative website. And he is promising to wage war on all of these enemies, everyone from Congress to the media to corporate America. He's battled openly with so many here in the West Wing, from Jared and Ivanka, Gary Cohn, the president's chief economic advisor. But take a look at what Steve Bannon told the Washington Post after he was ousted on Friday. He said if the Republican Party on Capitol Hill gets behind the president on his plans and not theirs. It will all be sweetness and light, be one big happy family. But he says he does not expect sweetness to happen anytime soon, George.
It looks like we have a very divisive September coming up. Cecilia Vega, thanks very much. I'll be anchoring a special report on the president's Afghanistan decision starting at 9 Eastern right here on ABC. Amy?
Well, George, more now on the great American eclipse. In just a few hours, the moon will pass completely in front of the sun, that event called totality, casting a shadow about 70 miles wide. The so-called path of totality spanning 14 states from Oregon to Charleston, South Carolina, where we find World News Tonight anchor David Muir. Good morning to you, David, in one of my favorite cities.
It is a great city. It's going to be a little dark here come later today, though, Aim. And if you had a magic marker and you started in Oregon and went right across the country down to South Carolina, that is the path of this total solar eclipse. We haven't seen a total solar eclipse here in the U.S. since 1979, but here's the really cool part this morning. We haven't seen one travel from coast to coast in this country in 99 years. The skies will darken. You'll see that corona around the sun, but a few other things will happen, too. Temperatures will drop about 10 to 12 degrees. And watch the animals. The birds get very confused. It's going to be a sight.
Infinite miles of cars, millions of people descending upon small towns like Madras, Oregon. So many like 10-year-old Amiko, eager to see the day turn into night.
I just think that it's going to be really fun to see because it's the first eclipse I'm going to see.
A total solar eclipse happens somewhere on Earth about twice every 3 years, often in remote areas, but this time, the first one on the continental U.S. in nearly 4 decades.
This is an ABC News special. Live coverage of the solar eclipse.
The date, February 26, 1979, at the news desk, Frank Reynolds.
Good morning. This is indeed a special events broadcast of a genuine special event. The last total eclipse of the sun over the continent this century.
Onlookers back then peering through what was considered protective eyewear. All eyes were on the sky in Maryhill, Washington. The heavens there beginning to darken. Then that awesome sight, the moon blacking out the sky, and minutes later, the light returning, bathing the crowd.
Not until August 21st, 2017, will another eclipse be visible from North America. That's 38 years from now.
And that day has come, and here's how it'll work. Beginning around 10:15 Pacific, the moon will move directly between the sun and the earth, casting a massive shadow that will briefly darken areas in 14 states along what's called the path of totality, 70 miles wide and 3,000 miles long. It'll take about 1 hour, 33 minutes, and it'll be the first time in 99 years that a total solar eclipse will span the entire continental U.S.
Oh my God! Look at that!
Some hoping to spot it from the air, like these passengers did on board an Alaska Airlines flight last year, far out over the Pacific. Viewers along this line in Makanda, Illinois, will experience the longest amount of darkness. 2 minutes and 40.2 seconds. And Hopkinsville, Kentucky, dubbed Eclipseville.
We're going to view it underwater.
That's right. Scuba divers watching with the fish. And these NASA pilots chasing the eclipse in 2 retrofitted bombers with telescopes mounted in the nose.
We'll go into total darkness for about 4 minutes for each aircraft.
And just as Frank Reynolds promised all those years ago, we'll be here through it all.
May the shadow of the moon fall on a world at peace. And ABC News, of course, will bring you a complete report on that next eclipse, 38 years from now.
And who knew we'd be the ones fulfilling Frank Reynolds' promise all these years later, but we are proud to be here with an incredible team from ABC News, meteorologists and reporters across this country this afternoon to witness it with you, 1 p.m. Eastern right here on ABC. Set your DVR if you have to head out to work. And Amy, keep this in mind. The moon's shadow travels so fast across this country at speeds of 1,800 miles per hour on average. It'll take about 1 hour and 33 minutes to get from one end of the country to the other, far faster than a commercial jetliner, but we'll be there every step of the way.
And we will be watching, David. Thanks so much. And speaking of meteorologists, we've got Ginger, who is in Nashville, the largest city in the path of totality, with more on how weather conditions will affect the eclipse. Good morning to you, Ginger.
Good morning to you, Amy. This could end up being one of the most important forecasts of my life because all it takes is one cloud and that obscures your view if you're in that path of totality. Behind me, you see the honky-tonks. They're all quiet now. That will not be the case. I want to take you to the map as to when and how this is going to happen cloud cover-wise. Right now, if you see green on the map, you are looking good as far as the eclipse goes. That's from parts of Oregon, as long as that marine layer stays away in the morning. Lincoln to Jefferson City, those plains, you get a little bit of storminess and some high clouds at least. Nashville's looking good right now. We might see some daytime heating clouds, but Charleston, out of the whole map, not looking as great. George?
Okay, Ginger, thanks very much. Let's get more on this now from former astronaut Mike Massimino, veteran of 2 missions on the Hubble telescope. Mike, I know you're excited about this today. Tell us what you hope people get out of it.
Well, George, thanks for having me. A couple things. One is being part of this cosmic ballet that I got to view from space between the sun, the moon, and the Earth and the universe. We don't get reminders of that very often here on Earth, but we're going to get one today, this reminder that we actually are on a planet going around the sun with the moon, and I think it's going to be a great reminder of where we are in the universe.
And it's a rare research opportunity for NASA as well.
Yeah, it sure is, George. The sun is so bright, even from space. It is so bright. You really can't see anything around it, particularly its atmosphere, the corona, the solar activity. And the moon just perfectly blocks out the sun during a total eclipse, like what's going to happen today. And you're able to see that ring of fire around the moon, and the scientists will be able to study the corona, all the activity, the solar activity around the sun, like they've never been able to do that before.
Very cool. And I know you're going to be hosting the Science Channel's coverage of the Great American Eclipse tonight. And as David said, he's going to anchor our coverage today starting at 1 Eastern. Amy?
All right, George, and now we celebrate one of the biggest stars of the last century. Jerry Lewis, comedian, filmmaker, humanitarian, passed away Sunday at the age of 91. A long life filled with monumental achievements and difficult challenges. Here's ABC's David Wright.
Jerry Lewis could get a laugh without speaking a word. Jerry Lewis was the zany clown to Dean Martin's suave sophisticate.
If you still kiss your girl after garlic and oil, that's amore.
That's amore. Could also be famously prickly. That character trait ultimately broke up Martin and Lewis, on full display in the last interview Lewis gave.
Have you ever thought about retiring?
Why? Most Americans know him for the role he took later in life.
Even though you're not so wealthy, you can make somebody healthy.
Those Labor Day telethons raised more than $2 billion for muscular dystrophy. Asked how he'd like to be remembered, he told ABC he didn't care.
I don't care what they write when it's over. I don't want to know about that. I'm not going to know about it.
He will be remembered as a comic legend.
What do we call our second cameraman?
We call our second cameraman Helen Keller. His favorite color is plaid.
Helen Keller, plaid, what is that?
When someone does an impression of me on the phone, the only way they're going to know it's really me is by that clue.
For Good Morning America, David Wright, ABC News, New York.
He made the world a better place in so many ways.
He sure do. I remember every Labor Day those telethons
Yes.
raised a lot of money, over $2 billion. I want to go back to Ginger in Nashville.
Yeah, and we've got to track those storms that are happening already this morning. Flash flood warnings in parts of Iowa. You can see that path of totality highlighted there. We put it on at 1 p.m. just so you can see where the cloud cover will be. Looking pretty decent. All right, let's get to the select cities now. Brought to you by PetSmart.
At PetSmart, we love all pets. Like this little guy, Sam. He eats Blue Wilderness. It's protein-rich, grain-free, and made with more meat to satisfy the wolf spirit that lives in every dog. Right now, buy one select Blue Wilderness bag at PetSmart and get 2 free cans or tubs. Because every dog still has a little wolf in them. And now, when you buy any bag of dog or cat food, we give a meal to a pet in need. It's that simple. PetSmart, for the love of pets.
Today, hot, humid, sticky, and of course, it's the day of the Great American Solar Eclipse with 80% coverage of the moon over the sun here locally. Again, we'll be fighting some clouds, but ample time to view. Just make sure you view safely for today and watch for those storms too. They'll be isolated. We've got our best chance coming between 4 and 7 p.m. today, so just after everything starts ending. Heat, humidity tomorrow, can't rule out an isolated storm as well as on Wednesday, and then we cool off for the end of the work week and weekend.
And when we come back, everyone getting ready for the Great American Eclipse. Our team spread out across the country, live from the path of totality, with the best way to see it wherever you are and how to make sure your eyes are safe.
And then a top Hollywood producer now facing a major lawsuit after his assistant mysteriously died while celebrating Jennifer Aniston and Justin Theroux's wedding. When we come back.
Sarah, could you come in here?
Yep, coming. Oh, wow. What kind of underwear are those?
They're breathable underwear from Fruit of the Loom.
What are those?
Guys,